One day, a beautiful elk approached a crystal clear pond to get a drink. As he bent down, he saw his reflection perfectly in the water. He couldn't help but admire what he saw. He loved his beautiful antlers, the way they arched and curved. He loved how powerful they made him look, and he knew that other elk admired them as well. Then he looked at his legs. He despised how skinny and spindly they looked. He hated the knobs on them. How is it, he sighed, that I have such a beautiful set of antlers, but am cursed with such ugly, useless legs?
Welcome to the Living Life Our Way podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping you live intentionally. Our goal is to take back control of our lives by living life on our terms. Join us as we work towards living life our way.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Troy.
And I'm Jeff. As we talked about last time, we've been doing this experiment in gratitude. And what we found is that there are some things in our lives that, although we may want to express gratitude for, we can't really muster a genuine gratitude for these things.
We find that we have a lot of stuff around us, and that we spend a lot of time thinking about other stuff that we'd like to get, whether it's replacing something we already have or is just a new shiny object. We spend a lot of time thinking about new stuff.
So as part of our attempt to be more intentional in our lives, we've kind of split our lives into these separate areas. And this gratitude, or this lack thereof, has kind of a trickle-down effect in a lot of these areas of our lives.
And one of the areas that it hits for us most profoundly is kind of our spiritual or mental or emotional well-being. Consumerism is the idea of acquiring new things and focusing on new things. And what we found as we've thought about it is that consumerism really is the antithesis of gratitude.
Yeah, this kind of more is better, or I need to upgrade, is really contradictory to what gratitude really means, which is kind of this sense of satisfaction and appreciation for what you already have, not the focus on what you don't.
And where we found this as being dangerous is because of what gratitude does for us. What we found is that gratitude really insulates us from a lot of the negative feelings that we have, whether it's frustration or even depression or anger. When we're feeling grateful, we don't have the capacity. We found we just don't have the capacity to feel those negative emotions. So we found that gratitude is a really powerful way to protect ourselves against some things that we don't want to feel.
Yeah, gratitude's a great shield, and the way to break down that shield is to focus on what you don't have, which is the core tenet of consumerism.
Right. So here you have this great way of protecting yourself against these bad feelings, but consumerism, or this focus on more stuff, breaks down that shield so you don't have the protection that gratitude offers.
And honestly, a lot of times the things that we are getting in that kind of consumeristic mindset are things that we ultimately don't want. In fact, I just went through my closet yesterday, and thinking about it from this source of what am I grateful for in this closet, I got rid of a bunch of my clothes because they were clothes that I held onto for emotional or sentimental reasons that really I will never wear. In fact, a great example is I got these shirts that all shrunk. They were the shirts that I really wanted, but after they'd shrunk, they were no use to me, but I still continued to keep them in my closet.
Well, and I think we have a tendency to believe that the stuff is where we find satisfaction or where we find fulfillment. And as we look at things from a gratitude perspective, at least for me, what it's done is it's encouraged me to think about what the stuff does for me. So what role that it plays. And though it's still a work in progress, to be sure, trying to approach things with the idea of preserving my ability to be grateful and finding that contentment really has helped me better evaluate what role this different stuff plays in my mental or emotional or even spiritual well-being.
Certainly. And taking those shirts as an example, the only role that those were playing in my life was the role of reminding me of a purchase I'm not happy I made.
Well, and so that certainly isn't something that is going to bring mental or emotional
Absolutely.
happiness. So So we do find there is real danger in the consumerism, in this idea of more stuff or better stuff. There's a real danger to that area of our life relating to mental or emotional or spiritual well-being. So gratitude, we found, really is the shield. It's the wall that protects us against a lot of those negative feelings. Consumerism is the threat to that wall or to that shield. So another area of life that we were interested to see how this idea of gratitude versus consumerism impacted us is as it relates to kind of organizational considerations or time management.
Yeah, so we've started this cleaning experiment. We've talked about it, and I think we're almost done with our full month of this 20 minutes a day cleaning experiment. And one thing that's come out of it is I'm grateful for the times when I don't have to work around all the stuff we've accumulated in order to accomplish that cleaning.
Right. To organize everything in order to facilitate quick cleaning, everything needs a spot. And just from a practical standpoint, the more stuff you have, the harder it is going to be to find good location for all of that stuff. So more stuff just means more time organizing and more time cleaning.
It's kind of brought about this gratitude for less stuff in certain areas of my life.
Right.
And you brought up an interesting statistic that we found when we were researching for this podcast, that the average American home has 300,000 items in it.
300,000 items is a ton of stuff that we have to organize and keep track of. What we found is as we've tried to clean and organize is there's a lot of those 300,000 items that just don't belong. All they are is really a distraction or a nuisance. There's something that we have to take care of that doesn't provide any value.
Yeah, and a great example of that is the show Storage Wars. You see these storage units that are just chock full of stuff, and they go through them, and there's really nothing of value in these storage units, and they're just accumulating stuff.
And ostensibly, it's all stuff that they couldn't fit in their house. So,
Yeah.
you hope that these storage units are a disaster because the homes are clean, but you worry that some of those homes might be a little bit of a disaster as well. So the threat is just that as we continue to get more stuff, again, it's just costing us more time and more energy to keep organized. It is impairing our ability to find and maintain order in our homes.
And that's not to mention the cost of accumulating that stuff. There's certainly the money, but the time associated with shopping and trying to keep up with trends and things, it's expensive.
It is. We found another stat that we thought was interesting. They surveyed 2,000 women, and not picking on women, but that's just who they surveyed. And they estimated that the average woman spent about 400 hours per year shopping. Now, to be fair, that would include grocery shopping and some non-discretionary shopping. So it's not maybe as bleak as it sounds, but to give you some perspective, we broke down that 400 hours into ways that we could kind of contextualize it.
Yeah, so in an 8-hour workday, 400 hours is 50 workdays.
So that is basically 2.5 months worth of work days that are spent each year shopping. Or another way to look at that is every 5 years, there's an equivalent of one full-time job for a whole year spent shopping. The bottom line is, from a time management perspective, consumerism's very, very expensive.
And being grateful for what you have, again, is the antidote to that consumerism.
For sure. And think of all the time that you gain if you can overcome some of that consumerism and reclaim some of that shopping time for activities that really bring value to your life.
Yeah, and one thing that we'll just mention, in a previous episode, we talked about the Diderot effect, and that's really one of those psychological things that drives a lot of this shopping, that purchases lead to more purchases.
Right.
And we'll link it up here.
Okay, so that brings us to the next area of life that we want to talk a little bit about as it relates to gratitude and consumerism, and that's our personal finances.
Yeah, just the cost of more stuff in terms of a dollar amount is a physical cost.
For sure. And it impacts us because it's money that's not available for something else. So we may, for instance, want to travel, but we're out shopping and buying new things, and the money that would be available otherwise for us to travel is spent on things that don't really provide us any great, meaningful value.
Yeah, that always trying to upgrade our stuff prohibits us from spending that money or using that money intentionally.
So, what is it about shopping that gets us into that sort of pattern?
Yeah, it's really dopamine that's driving a lot of this shopping. The going out and getting new stuff. It's exciting. It's kind of a journey. You get to go through and pick out what you want. But chasing that dopamine is a short-sighted mindset.
Right. It's not something that's going to provide long-term fulfillment or satisfaction. The one other thing that we see from a finance perspective as it relates to that area of life is just improving our decision making. Ideally, we want our finances to be intentional, just like all the other areas of our life.
Yeah, so making our finances work for us is really the purpose of that money. It's not to be a slave to the money in terms of buying new things, chasing that dopamine hit. One thing that I think a lot of people underestimate is the power of security in finances. A lot of people living paycheck to paycheck are sacrificing a lot of mental well-being in terms of security because they never have a backfill of money.
Right. And I think that as we look at what we're really wanting out of that area of life, the ability to have the mental and emotional freedom as well as the practical freedom to actually spend money and have money available for those things that really matter, including just the emergencies that might come up, having the security of knowing that you've got some money set aside for those.
Yeah, so spending that money decreases your security, which makes you want to chase more of that feel-good dopamine, which then decreases your security. So the so-called retail therapy actually isn't therapeutic, it's a downward spiral.
Correct. So, and we talked about that a little bit before in our podcast about dating oneself, or how we show love to ourselves and the dangers of using retail therapy as a means of treating ourselves when in reality it's oftentimes just damaging ourselves.
Yeah, so getting control of your finances and really spending intentionally, being grateful for what you do have is really a way that we can make our money work for us, not work for our money.
Great. And speaking of working for our money, the one other area of life that we'd like to talk a little bit about as it relates to gratitude and consumerism is our work life, whether it's as an employee or as a business owner. Oftentimes, what we choose to do to earn money is dictated by the lifestyle that we feel we have to maintain.
Yeah, so oftentimes you'll hear people talk about golden handcuffs, and they're not handcuffs to your job because of the money. They're handcuffs to your job because you need that money to maintain a lifestyle that may not ultimately be satisfying.
Correct. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows after a certain level of income, more income reduces overall life satisfaction. And a lot of it comes from just that. We often have to work harder or have to work in a job that we don't enjoy because we need to maintain a lifestyle that in turn isn't providing us fulfillment. So it's a double whammy. We're not fulfilled at our job and we're working to preserve a lifestyle that isn't fulfilling either.
So yeah, with consumerism, we actually are paying for things twice. We're paying both with the money that we actually pay, but also in the degradation of kind of our general happiness and well-being.
Degradation. Big word. What do you mean by degradation?
Yeah, just kind of the reduction of our life satisfaction.
That's right. Consumerism is a little bit like a hamster wheel, that it just makes us keep running and oftentimes running faster and faster, but we don't get anywhere that we want to get.
Yeah, there's no question about that. In fact, there's a YouTube video that we'll link to in the description or show notes. It's not for everybody. But this guy, his whole strategy was to figure out how to save enough money that ultimately could return enough to maintain the lifestyle that he wants.
Yes, and a lot of it came down to decisions about what really mattered to him and what didn't. And that really, I think, is one of our big takeaways about gratitude and this gratitude experiment. Is yes, we can be grateful for everything, but for some things, that gratitude is really for its absence or should be for its absence. Mm-hmm. If it's not something that is actually contributing real value to our lives, get rid of it and be grateful that it's gone.
Yeah, this practice of daily gratitude really has made it clear what things I care about and what things I actually don't care about.
Right. And those that you don't care about, let's get rid of.
Yeah, no question. There's no need for extra waste.
Yeah. All right. So now let's get back to our elk. So this elk is drinking from this beautiful pond and admiring his beautiful antlers when suddenly he hears wolves approaching. Well, immediately he runs from the sight with his ugly, useless legs carrying him away from danger. And just as he was realizing how grateful he was for his legs, his antlers suddenly got stuck in some of the tree growth of the forest. As the wolves closed in, he realized that the legs that he was so ashamed of were really his greatest attribute, and the antlers that he was so proud of ultimately proved his demise.
Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about this principle of mistakes we make when attributing value to certain items.
Right. Just like the elk, sometimes we make big mistakes in overvaluing certain things and undervaluing other things. We'll talk about what causes that next time.
Look forward to seeing you in the next one. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with a friend.